Hey,
Yeah.
hey, do you think we're ever gonna go to space?
Oh God, I hope not, man.
Why not?
I mean, there's nothing out there. It's just rocks and
Yeah, but like, there could be, right? I mean, you never know.
yeah, but I mean, I doubt it. It's just, you know,
Well, I
it's
mean, the astronauts went to the moon and they weren't bored.
yeah. I'm not an astronaut, so
Hmm. Huh. Okay, so in my opinion, Starfield has two main problems, and both of those are related to travel. Problem one is, of course, planetary travel, because when you're on a planet in Starfield, there isn't really a lot to do. You pretty much land at your ship, and then there's a point of interest way out in the distance, and you run there, and between you and that point of interest is usually nothing. Now, personally, I don't actually mind that too much, right? I'm one of those people who enjoy looking at rocks and stuff, so when I'm on Pluto or something like that and I'm just running across a barren planet basically, I don't mind just like stopping and kind of looking at all of the rocks and looking at the sky and all of that sort of stuff and just kind of taking in the views. And of course, I think it's in general more interesting as well when you're on a planet that actually has some sort of life, because there's life that you can look at, right? There's like trees that you can look at, plants, you can scan some of the animals along your way. It makes it a lot more interesting. And to be honest, I think this should have been pretty much expected, right? Because the thing that I hear people bring up a lot is comparing Starfield to something like Skyrim. So you'll like land on your ship and when you run to your point of interest, you see nothing there. Whereas in Skyrim, when you are running to your point of interest, you'll pass a bunch of caves and random encounters and all sorts of interesting things like that. But I think that's kind of missing the point of Starfield, right? Because it's not Skyrim. It's supposed to be a space game, right? And space is pretty big, right? So there's gonna be a lot of empty space in this sort of area. And I also just think it would be impossible to populate over 1,000 planets with like interesting things every couple steps of the way, so I think that's kind of expected. But to me, the journey isn't about getting off your ship and then running to the point of interest. The journey that should be compared to Skyrim is the whole thing, so flying through space and getting to that planet in the first place, because a lot of random encounters should be taking place in space, but they don't. Now, as I said, running across a barren planet for a lot of people is going to be very boring. Even if there's life on it, it might be life that you've already seen. So for a lot of people, that is going to be pretty boring. So I think some form of rover or some better form of travel was definitely needed there, and it would have added a lot more to it. And I think a lot of people would have cared much less about the kind of travel in that regard. But the second issue, and for me the actual important and biggest one, is the space travel, because in Starfield, there is no deep space. It doesn't exist. When you are in space, you are only ever around orbit of a planet or a space station. That is it. You are at no point in deep space where there is just nothing around. And that, I think, is a really huge problem, because I think the game lacks any sort of real space travel, and that to me is much more important than the actual planetary travel. Because again, I don't mind running from point A to point B for a few hundred meters on a barren planet. I kind of like taking in the sights and I like the quiet moments, and it kind of makes it feel more immersive, right? It makes it feel a bit more real. I don't mind that personally, but the space travel is the one that really, really bugs me. Now let's talk about Starfield, right? And what I think is going on, because it has been announced recently that there are a lot of good things in the work for Starfield, and they're working on a lot of stuff. They've also announced things like city maps, general quality of life updates, and of course the big one being new ways to travel. Now don't get too excited. Let me start first of all with what I think this means, what I think these new way to travel means. And it is basically, in my head, just a new jetpack, right? I think instead of it going just up and letting you fly a bit, I think it's going to go up and then shoot forward and give you like a boost. I think, judging by Bethesda and how they often work, I would imagine that's kind of the level that they're aiming for when they talk about these new ways to travel. I don't think it's going to be anything big or interesting like that. And I really, really hope I'm wrong, but that's what I think it's going to be. Now let's talk about what I really hope it's going to be. And again, there are two things, both related to both of these problems. Number one, of course, being some kind of rover or land vehicle, right? Being able to get a car out on a planet and just drive to your destination is going to be infinitely way more fun than just running there, right? And again, as someone who doesn't even mind the running, I still would prefer a car. I would love a car. It'd make it so much more fun, so much more enjoyable. And that shouldn't really take a lot of work. I mean, there are modders who got cars working in Fallout New Vegas, so the engine can handle it. But the second thing, the thing that I think is a lot bigger, but also more important, is the actual space travel, because I think there needs to be new ways of space travel. And what I mean by that is flying from planet to planet. I think that is something that is integral to Starfield and is something that is missing, and in my opinion, one of the biggest issues with the game. Now, coming up to the release of Starfield, I've said time and time again on this channel that this is not a space simulation game. It is a Bethesda RPG that happens to be set in space. I made that very clear. I tried very hard to lower everyone's expectations because I knew that space travel wasn't going to be a big thing in this game. But even I was still disappointed by what we actually got, because in Starfield, as I'm sure you already know, you don't actually get to travel from planet to planet. You simply fast travel there with a little like kind of cutscene. And I think that is one of Starfield's biggest flaws, because they've made a space game that is set in space and it's about exploring the universe, but they've taken that whole exploration element and that whole immersive vibe of exploring space and just completely taken it away and just made it all about fast travel. That, to me, is unforgivable. Now, the weird thing with Starfield is that you can actually travel in deep space. You can go from planet to planet and anywhere in between. If you use console commands on PC, you can speed up the game so that you can actually fly out of a planet's orbit and get to a different planet. Now, nothing happens when you get there. I mean, it plays the little intro, but if you keep going towards it, you will just clip through it. It is still just an image, basically. But the fact that you literally already can, if you want to, fly out of a planet's orbit and fly all the way to another one, tells me that at some point, this was something that was working in the game. Probably alongside fuel, and then they decided to cut it because it just wasn't fun enough. Now, of course, the big problem with doing this is that all of the stuff that generates when you go into a planet's orbit, like all of the random encounters and stuff, that only happens within like a certain radius of a planet's orbit, right? So once you fly out of that planet's orbit and make your way over to another one, nothing generates between there. It is literally dead space because nothing happens. Now, something I think Bethesda could do on their end, and maybe are doing, I really hope so, but something I think that they could do is just add that kind of system back in, because I don't imagine it would be too hard, since again, it is already technically possible. All they would have to do is do something like No Man's Sky and just kind of let you hyperdrive towards a planet where it kind of puts you in this beam and makes everything go a bit faster as you're flying towards it, and then allow these random encounters to spawn outside of the planet's orbit zone as well, so you can encounter some weird stuff in space. As well as also making a system where pirates can possibly pull you out of hyperdrive. I think just doing that at the bare minimum would add so much to this game and bring so many players back, especially me. Again, it doesn't seem like a very complicated thing to do. It does, I mean, I'm not a developer, but it doesn't seem that hard since it seems like the game can already handle it, and adding that kind of hyperspace pull system shouldn't be that difficult either. And again, I just think it'll go a long way in terms of immersion and just adding so much more to the game, especially in terms of space exploration. But that's the two main things I kind of want Starfield to do. Now let's talk about what I think Bethesda are doing, slash kind of what I hope they're doing, and that all kind of relates to E3. Or I should say not E3, you know, Summer Games Fest now. Now, it's been quite a while since we've got any Starfield updates, and I believe that they were doing them every 6 weeks or so, and all of these updates have just kind of been very minor, right? Just some bug fixes, a few quality of life things, just very small things. Here is my hope, and here is what I would do if I was in Bethesda's position, right? Hold off on all the big updates until the DLC. Because we all know that Shattered Space is coming out sometime this year. I would say probably between September and November. And it makes a lot of sense to hold off on any big updates that they're working on, so these new ways of travel, if that is something really cool like a rover and maybe adding more space travel as well. Doing stuff like that and holding off until the DLC, I think, is actually a really good move, and again, it's what I would do if I was in their shoes. Now picture this, okay? It is Summer Games Fest and we're all sitting down watching the show, and the Starfield Shattered Space DLC gets announced, right? They show a cool flashy trailer, it shows off some of the story. Cool, it looks pretty decent, right? But then they also announce that there is a huge quality of life update that is dropping alongside the DLC completely for free. And this update adds all of the cool things that they're kind of talking about, right? These new ways to travel. So it adds a new rover to the game. It adds better space exploration with hyperdrive, meaning you can jump from planet to planet and actually see that happen. New encounters that you can run into deep space, you know? So there'll be like more abandoned ships and pirates and all sorts of things that you can find in space. new points of interest that get generated on planets that kind of make it a bit more diverse and more interesting to find. And just a bunch of new free content that is coming alongside the DLC. And of course you actually have the DLC they're releasing as well for players who are coming back to the game, and they also have a bunch of new content, a new storyline, a new quest, and whatever else the DLC is going to hold. Now to me, this makes a lot of sense because you're getting a lot of players back into the game by releasing this update all at once. Because think of it if they release these updates every 6 weeks, right? And they said, okay guys, this update we're adding a rover into the game, right? There's finally land vehicles in Starfield, cool. That's the big update. Not many people are going to come back. A few people will, but not many. And then 6 more weeks pass, and then they go, okay, well, here's our next update. It is now city maps. You know, we have these maps now and you can see around. Cool, a few people will go in and check it out, but not many people again. And then another 6 weeks pass and they go, hey, we're adding new like points of interest and stuff. And these updates are slowly coming, right? You get the point. So every couple of weeks, these updates are going to come out and they're going to add new things and whatever, right? But it's not gonna make many headlines, it's not gonna get that many people back into the game, maybe in a year or two, but not right away. Now again, take my theory as an example. So they announced the DLC and they announced a release date for this DLC, and on the day that the DLC releases, they also drop this huge content update that has everything that they're working on, everything. New vehicles, new ways to travel, new points of interest, the whole thing, right? It's a big update. It's a big update for people who already own the season pass and have the DLC, and it's a big update for people who just want to come back and check it out. That is going to make headlines. That is going to pull a lot of players back into the game to give this a second chance. So yeah, for me, that makes a lot of sense, and honestly, it's what I hope that they're doing and kind of what I think they're doing, because they've been so quiet about these new updates. If they're actually doing anything meaningful, I would imagine releasing it alongside the DLC. It just makes the most sense, right? And then maybe like a month after the DLC releases, you finally release that creation kit as well so people can get modding the game. I think that would just be a really good PR move for Bethesda. I think it would bring a lot of people back into Starfield, and it would just be overall really good for the community. Now, it does suck that we would have to wait that long, you know, for the DLC to drop, for all of these updates and everything, but getting it all at once, I just feel as though would be a lot better than getting it kind of sprinkled out over every couple of weeks, right? I mean, maybe that's just me personally, but it's like, if I was getting a bunch of presents, you know, I would rather all of them on one day rather than getting like one every week throughout the year. It just kind of feels better, you know? I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does to me. But yeah, I don't know. That is my theory. My theory is that they're holding it all for not E3, and they're going to reveal everything there and pretty much release this big free update that has all of these quality of life things alongside the DLC. That's like my dream theory, right? That's what I want to be happening. But my actual common sense theory of what I genuinely think is happening, I think that they are going to release these new ways to travel for free alongside the DLC, but I don't expect much from it. Again, I think it's going to be something like a new jetpack or just something that's really underwhelming. Just because, I mean, why not be cynical at this point, right? Bethesda have not shown us that they're capable of doing anything better, and they haven't showed us that they want to do anything better. And of course, I know that Starfield has other issues, right? It's not just the travel. A lot of people don't like the quest design and stuff, but for me, those are the two biggest things I think need to be fixed. If those two things are fixed, I think the game is going to be like 1,000 times better. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I expect a big update at E3 with the DLC, and I also expect them to do some sort of free content update alongside of it. I'm really hoping that that content update will be huge and have a bunch of new things, but I'm expecting the absolute bare minimum from Bethesda at this point. But let me know what you think. Do you think Bethesda are gonna actually try and fix Starfield, or do you think they're just gonna abandon it, move on to Elder Scrolls 6? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss when I next upload a video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Jake, and I will see you next time.